You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the College Loop Podcast, episode 266 of the College Loop Podcast. I'm Larck, on Twitter, here to talk to y'all today about yesterday's loss to Missouri. Yet another game where Auburn has a lead, then ultimately loses a lead. Now, it's like clockwork at this point. First drive of the game, Brady Cook, Missouri's quarterback, goes out with an injury. Third quarter comes around, they're saying, unlikely to return. And I don't know what they injected him with, but he was back in the game the third quarter, turned it around, scored 18 unanswered points to give Auburn the 21-17 loss. Now, it's getting tiring at this point to talk about this. It's happened against Oklahoma, happened against Arkansas. Auburn cannot find ways to win a football game. They can find ways to lose one, but they cannot find any fathomable way to get a win. And you look down to the rest of the season, you have Kentucky next week in Lexington. You have Vanderbilt that next week. Then you have a bye week before you got to get ready to play the last three games of your schedule, which are ULM, Texas A&M, and, of course, Alabama. Now, can Auburn find a way to win 4 games? I mean, sure, you can get the next 3 games. I mean, you could win against Kentucky. You could win against Vanderbilt. You could win against ULM. But you got to find a way to upset either Texas A&M, who's been playing like one of the best teams in the country this year. I think Texas A&M is probably going to be one of those teams we're talking about in January as a part of the college football playoff. But you got to find ways to beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, which Auburn has not been able to do in a very long time, i.e. you had to have an actual superhuman on your team to be able to get there. Now, looking at this team, I mean, there are so many questions that need to be asked. Now, don't take this as any sentiment that I want Hugh Freeze fired. I don't think we should fire Hugh Freeze. And again, if we're here next year, if 2-5 next year, then I'll listen to the conversation. I'll be a part of that conversation. But as it stands right now, I don't think Hugh Freeze is on the hot seat. Now, there might be discussions that fans can have, but I don't think there's any reasonable way that Auburn can fire Hugh Freeze, find a coach who in a quick enough time that the top 5 recruiting class is currently on its way in won't fall apart. That's my issue with everyone on the hot seat conversation is if you fire Hugh Freeze, you lose all your recruits. You lose all momentum you have in the recruiting rankings. Is it worth it? I don't think it is, because then you're right back to square one where you were 2 years ago. But questions do need to be answered. Now, I don't think Peyton Thorne lost Auburn this game. I'll start off with the offense, because I think the offense is going to be a heavy emphasis on why Auburn lost this game. Starting off with the quarterback situation. I don't think Peyton Thorne cost Auburn this game, but I think he didn't make the right throws. Now, there were a couple throws that he made a perfect throw to Cam Coleman down the sideline that he ran in for a 47-yard touchdown. And he made a perfect throw to Robert Lewis in the back of the end zone that should have been caught. In all caps, should have been caught. But, I mean, I at some point, your offense just needs a game changer at quarterback that Auburn doesn't have right now. Going to the running back room, Jarquez Hunter had 19 carries, only had 57 yards. Peyton Thorne had 11 carries for 18 yards. Jeremiah Cobb had 2 carries for 16 yards. Malcolm Simmons had a carry for 15. Overall, Auburn and Damari Alston got in for 2 carries with only 4 yards. Now, I don't know where Damari Alston was for the remainder of the game. But Jeremiah Cobb and Damari only having 4 carries amongst the two of them is baffling to me. And Auburn only having 110 yards is kind of alarming. But a lot of the failure in the run game comes from the fact that the Auburn offensive line has been on a tear recently when it comes to making sure your quarterback doesn't get sacked or no pressure is getting put in the backfield, that holes are opening up. Auburn's offensive line has been able to do that this far. And Percy Lewis, I mean, as someone who is very high on the precedent of what he can bring to Auburn in the preseason, I am shocked at how bad Percy Lewis has been this entire season. He has been awful. I mean, blocks are not being made. He is slow off the line. Sometimes he's too quick and causes a false start that ruins all momentum. The offensive line has held at times that have cost Auburn major plays that get called the other way. There's an issue with the offensive line. And in a time where you have a bunch of guys, you have depth at those positions. You have Tyler Johnson, you have Braden Joyner, you have all these guys that you can mix and match. You can put Dylan Wade at left tackle. I think at this point, anything is better than putting Percy Lewis back out there at starting at your left tackle. The left tackle is the most important part of your offensive line, especially if you're working with a right-handed quarterback. It's the most important part. You have to find someone who can guard the blind side. But Percy Lewis has been a liability thus far and has had a rough stretch of games that has cost Auburn drives. And I don't see where you go in to next week with him still there. And now the argument for this goes for a lot of positions is, do you have anybody better than that? Well, you're not going to know if you don't put them out there. And I mean, this goes into the wide receiver room conversation. I'm just going through the entire offense because I find it so dumb that there are so many people on this team that aren't getting the football, aren't getting targets, aren't getting anything thrown their way. Where has Perry Thompson been over the past few weeks? I have very rarely seen Perry Thompson get on the. I don't think it might have been since Oklahoma, the last time he's caught a pass. It's just so dumb that we are going another game this season where I have to sit down and look around and ask myself, where's Perry Thompson? Perry Thompson has 4 catches this year and is still a top 5 receiver on this football team. Robert Lewis has 3 times the catches that Perry Thompson has and has 10 less yards, has 1 less touchdown, is averaging 20 less yards per catch. Why in the world, in that situation, in any situation, Robert Lewis has not been it this year? He's not. He was a G5 recruit, and sometimes those guys can work out. And I think that a lot of those guys end up playing very well. But as the season has progressed, as the season has gotten into over the halfway point, I mean, Auburn is now 2-5 with 5 games left to play. Why are you keeping Robert Lewis out there? In any given situation, right now, the starting wide receiver room, going from the 2 outside guys should be Keandre Lambert-Smith and Cam Coleman. Your slot guy, Malcolm Simmons. Once those 2 come off, once Keandre Lambert-Smith or Cam Coleman come off the field, Perry Thompson should be checking in. Camden Brown should be checking in for one of them. And I just don't think we've seen enough of Robert Lewis to get him out of being a backup slot guy. He should be behind Malcolm Simmons. There should not be another game in this season where Robert Lewis should get the nod over guys like Malcolm Simmons or Perry Thompson. Those 2 have performed extremely well whenever they've gotten looks, whenever they've gotten plays thrown their way. I don't understand. And we hear about the young guys getting in, the young guys performing well. Cam Coleman has 250 yards in the year. Malcolm Simmons has 289 yards in the year. Perry Thompson, 123. Why are we not utilizing them a lot more than we are? Cam Coleman only had 1 catch against Missouri. 1 catch. And, of course, he had, let me make sure I get this, he had 2 targets. 2 targets for Cam Coleman. Malcolm Simmons, he had 4 targets. He had 4 catches. Valdo had 6 targets, 3 catches. But then I looked down this list. I don't know where Perry Thompson is. Sam Jackson got himself a target and that he dropped on a key 3rd down. But I don't know why we're not seeing more Perry Thompson. And now we're 8 weeks into the year, at this point, 9 weeks if you count week 0. But you have 7 games of film on your wide receiver core, and you're constantly putting in the wrong guys into situations. Out of there, I can think of, off the top of my head, four wide receivers in the situation Robert Lewis is in the back of the end zone that would have made that catch. I think Cam Coleman makes that catch. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith definitely makes that catch. I think Malcolm Simmons makes that catch. Perry Thompson, I'll put it, I will straight up say it. I think Perry Thompson makes that catch in the back of the end zone. Just something's not clicking with this team. It's baffling to see it happen week in and week out where something is wrong with this team. Do I think Auburn can turn it around? I don't know. Everything that pointed in the way of Auburn turning the season around started with them beating Missouri. Like, we talked about Auburn making it to a bowl game. First thing they have to do, got to beat Missouri. Does Auburn want to continue to gain momentum on the season and keep recruits wanting to come to Auburn? You got to beat Missouri. This was a 4-game stretch that was so important to Auburn finding a way to get extra practices for early enrollees, for getting extra opportunities for young guys in a game situation that doesn't matter to the season because you're already in the bowl game season. But you squandered it. You've squandered it. And of course, props to Hugh Freeze. He puts the blame on himself, but he also puts the blame on everybody else. Looking at this team, it is baffling to me how bad it is. The talent is there. Auburn has, at the same time, Auburn has the most explosive offense in the SEC while being the most apt to implode on itself. Auburn is one of the top teams when it comes to yards per carry and yards per pass and passing yard, or like 20-yard plus passing yard, or like plays, and all this stuff. They have big play abilities, but when the game comes down to it, the team is not doing it. I think this Auburn offense can score from everywhere on the field except for the 20 yards that's their red zone. Once they cross the 50, they have to score a touchdown within 30 yards, or once they get to the 20-yard line, they're either going to turn the ball over, turn it over on downs, or they're going to miss a field goal. I would love for someone to go out there, go through the games again, watch all the games again. Look at how many points Auburn has squandered in the red zone. And I'm sure I could probably find that real quick, Auburn's red zone efficiency. But I want to know the point totals. I want to know how many points Auburn has not scored. Auburn has lost, 5 games up to this point. And in those 5 games, Auburn has only scored more than 17 points in one of them. And their losses, they've scored 14, 14, 21, 13, and 17. And this team is one that gets a lot of yards. They pass the ball a lot and get a lot of big plays down the field. Jarquez Hunter has a lot of explosive runs. And whenever they actually decide to make him a focal point of the offense, Jarquez Hunter is a very vital part of why Auburn has this explosive offense. Cam Coleman is. Keandre Lambert-Smith is. Malcolm Simmons is. But when it comes down to scoring, Auburn can't do it. The only games they have where they've put up more than 22 points was against New Mexico, known as one of the worst, probably the worst defense Auburn has played or will play all year, and Alabama A&M, who's an FCS team, the middle of the pack FCS team. I don't know what you do at this point. Auburn fans, including myself, I guess you're already considering the fact that this season is a wash. You already know that. Everyone already knows this season is a wash. At this point, you're just trying to make it. You're trying to get over the finish line. You're limping. You are hurting everywhere. All you're trying to do now is just get to the end of the season. You got to find ways to not just give up on the season or give up. You can't give up. Because one of the annoying parts about this team, and I've been saying all the annoying parts about this team this far and all throughout the year, because it's a weekly show where we talk about how Auburn lost another game. Looking at the schedule, their losses are Cal beat you by 7, Arkansas by 10, Oklahoma by 6, Georgia 18, Missouri beat you by 4. So not counting Georgia, you lost by a combined point total of 27. Or you're averaging at least losing a game by a touchdown, give or take, on average, losing by a touchdown in those games that you have a chance to win in. But whenever the going gets tough, you turn around and let the team beat you. As soon as Brady Cook came in, I heard Mike G talk about this too. As soon as Brady Cook came back into this ball game, and I knew it was over. Auburn at that point had not been able to score, was able to score off of a great play by Peyton Thorne and Cam Coleman, and then Malcolm Simmons making an absolutely amazing defensive play on a punt, but that wasn't a drive. But Auburn's offense in this game: punt, field goal, fumble, punt, touchdown, punt, downs. I think I'm also missing a missed field goal. Okay, yeah, I missed a missed field goal. That's an explosive offense not able to get in the end zone. That is a team with talent you cannot use as a blame anymore. Auburn has the talent to win all of these games. They're just not winning the game. They're just not able to get across the finish line of these games without, letting the other team pass them. At the highest the highest point in this game, Auburn had like a 96% chance to win. They had an opportunity to beat a top 25 team and turn the season around. Go into next week against Kentucky and find a way to beat Kentucky. Kentucky is very beatable. And then try to turn that momentum into finding a way to beat Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. And then turning around and taking down ULM, an opponent that, preseason I thought Auburn didn't have a chance at losing at. But watching this team, this team doesn't know how to win. There's no gusto in this team. This team doesn't know how to win. In the slightest, this team cannot win on their own. They need something to go their way, and nothing has. You lose Alex McPherson at the beginning of the season, beginning of the year, and I hope he's doing well. I hope he's back soon. And you watch Towns Magoo at A-Day. And, we were like, well, if Alex is still dealing with what he's dealing with, at least Towns can go in and keep the job warm for him. And Auburn doesn't have to rely on, missed field goals, or doesn't have to watch missed field goals. But Towns is currently 5 for 10 on the year. And right now he has been one of the worst kickers that I can look back and remember. I was there for Cody Parkey, and I know he was a little mixed opinions on how he was as his career at Auburn. Had a career percentage record of 73. Wes Byram had 75%. But my biggest memory of Auburn kicking, that in my prime of being a fan, remembering everything, was Daniel Carlson. 80% field goal percentage, never missed a PAT, which a lot of these guys never really did. Auburn always has. But the issue is Auburn has, in my lifetime, I can't think of ever worrying about Auburn and kicking a field goal. I watched Daniel Carlson get Les Miles fired at LSU because he went 6 for 6 and beat LSU single-handedly. I watched Daniel Carlson beat LSU. And now I'm watching Auburn miss out on point after point after point after point on field goals because Towns in a rut. And I don't want to just bash a kid, just to do it, but something's got to give. And if it's, going forward on fourth down when you're cross your line, whenever you cross the 50-yard line, or if it's punting from the 40 or the 35, I don't know where you feel confident in him going at. And of course, Hugh Freeze said that, Alex can kick it from the short distances. I mean, I guess that would be like inside the 30, but Alex McPherson has only ever missed one kick in his entire career at Auburn. He's 19 of 20. And right now, I have a list in front of me. Out of in careers since 2000, Towns McGill has it tied for the last in field goal percentage out of kickers who have kicked more than just one kick. And it just baffles me that's what we're talking about now. It baffles me that that's what's happening at Auburn. Auburn is so bad right now that Auburn can't even score field goals. And what hurts the most about it is they're doing this while the defense is actually playing pretty good. I think this defense has been an absolute, massive bright spot on this team. You're watching young guys develop in real time. I mean, Jay Crawford, Kinsley Faustin, Caleb Harris, DeMarcus Riddick, Malik Blockton. I'd even throw Keldrick Falcon in the mix, where he's a sophomore. You're watching all these young guys develop in real time in their first years as a starter. At first years, just in college football, outside of Keldrick Falk for that one, and you're watching them become impact players. Jay Crawford almost made an absolute SportsCenter top 10 interception in this game. He jumped up with one hand but couldn't bring it back down, which I could hear like a video game commentator like, this is why you're not playing receiver kind of thing. But a lot of these guys are just, it sucks for the defense because they're trying to keep Auburn into football games. And, whenever you have to go right back out there after 3 plays, 4 plays, or not even, the team doesn't even get 2 minutes of possession at any given time. And you have to go right back out there. And then big plays happen. But with every fair share of good, Auburn has that same quality of bad. I mean, if you look at that secondary, the young guys are a bright spot, but the non-bright spots are some of the older guys. I think this year we have watched Keontae Scott go from a draftable nickel corner to a guy who is going to get signed as an undrafted free agent. But I think we've actively watched his stock just plummet. Keontae Scott has become a liability in coverage. I honestly think to this point that the first read of an offense now has to be, where's Keontae Scott at? Throw it his way. I was wondering why is it. And the thing is, I love Keontae Scott. I think he's athletically a gifted player. I think he has the potential to be really good. He was great last year, but something's off. And I should never be watching an Auburn football game or against like a Missouri and see Luther Burden, who is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver in college football. I know his stats don't really show it this year, but I mean, as a potential, I mean, he is. I think he's a better wide receiver than Travis Hunter is. Sue me. But I should never think that a true freshman would be a better man-to-man cover guy on the best wide receiver in college football over a 4-year player who got some all-SEC nods last year. And the thing is, I don't think Auburn is at a place where they can take Keontae Scott out of the game. But I think you got to find a way to get that way. The young guys have looked great. I mean, Antonio Kite got a touchdown off of Malcolm Simmons' forced muff. But you got to find a way to make your secondary that much stronger by taking out the guys who are giving up those big plays. And, I mean, I love putting in the young guys much of the next guy, but I don't know who you'd put in for that. I don't know who the backup nickel is. I think it's J.C. Hart. but even JC Hart's given up some massive plays this year, and I know he's still growing as a player. But that's like the biggest part of it. The defense is like sometimes they give up big plays, but whenever you're sitting there and the offense is just going everywhere but forwards, the dam's going to break and points are going to get scored. 18 unanswered because, you can't get off the field. Your offense can't stay on the field long enough. They're not getting points. They're not scoring touchdowns. They're not scoring field goals. I don't know what to do. I have lost the ability to give my take on what Auburn needs to do to win these football games. Because winnable game after winnable game after winnable game after winnable game after winnable game have all turned to losses. Auburn let a true freshman quarterback in Michael Hawkins for Oklahoma come back and beat Auburn. And then a couple weeks later, Oklahoma loses 34-3 to Texas with the same quarterback. And then that quarterback gets benched against South Carolina because South Carolina beat the ever-loving snot out of Oklahoma. South Carolina beat the ever-loving snot out of Oklahoma. You're watching the SEC find ways to win games, but Auburn can't. I'd argue Auburn has more talent than probably. Let me go look at the SEC rankings real quick. Let me just make sure my math is mathing on this one. So Auburn has more talent than Kentucky. Auburn has more talent than South Carolina. Auburn has more talent than Arkansas and Vanderbilt. I don't think I can say Missouri, but I would think about it. So Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. 5 teams Auburn has more talent than behind every single one of them. The only team Auburn is not behind is Mississippi State, and that's because they're 1-6, and they're actively a bad team. But they're going to get away with being a bad team because they're in the first year of their head coach. Auburn's in year 2. You're going to make it to year 3. The issues this year cannot be the issues next year. Going into next season, your quarterback room cannot be a weakness. It's been a weakness all year, and the answer for it was to bench Peyton Thorne for a game and a half. And then whenever your backup quarterback makes I don't even want to say makes the same mistakes, because I look back at that Arkansas game. I think like one interception I fully put on Hank Brown being just making a bad call. But the other 2 interceptions, I think that was just a great defensive play. But if you're not going to bench Peyton Thorne after his games, then you just bench him. I mean, you've already just shown Hank Brown that he's not the future of this team. Looking at like Walker White. Walker White's not been on any of the rosters to travel. He's been on the scout team all year, so you can't really turn to him. You can't throw him under the bus for this season. And Holden Geriner, I fully believe he still has the foot out the door. I mean, I watched Holden Geriner go out there on the last play of a half, and instead of trying to make a play and make a touchdown, I saw him full on run out of bounds for a 6-yard gain. So you have a quarterback with the foot out the door. You have a quarterback that you're losing confidence in, or at least he might be losing confidence in himself. And you have another guy who hasn't even really been seeing any action. And, of course, you have Peyton Thorne who's going to be leaving. So next year, you have that same quarterback you lost confidence in Hank Brown. You have Walker White being able to move up from the scout team up to the active roster. And then you have Deuce Knight coming in. So now Auburn has an issue with 3 young guys at quarterback for next year. And that can only be solved. The issue will be solved by Auburn getting a transfer portal quarterback. Who that will be, I don't know. The portal's not opened yet. But Auburn's going to have to find a portal quarterback. And you got to hope and pray that you're not in a vicious cycle. The worst thing Auburn has done all year, calendar year, was not opening up the checkbook and trying to bring in Cam Ward, who is now a Heisman frontrunner. I believe he's second in the Heisman race, right behind Ashton Jeanty, and right in front of or right behind Travis Hunter. He's either 2 or 3 on the list. And Auburn had every opportunity to grab him, just chose not to, and let Miami take him. And now Miami's undefeated. I believe a top 5 team in the country, with every opportunity in front of them to clinch a college football playoff spot. And Auburn has to sit there and waddle in the mud they put themselves in by not getting a X-factor quarterback and making stupid plays. Auburn has actively found ways to lose football games, and Kentucky's up next. Early look at Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky's a great team. 5-7 at this point of the year, 5-7 is a win. It's a massive win for morale. If you can find a way to win these next 3 games, you go into year 3 with more hope than you would if you go 3-9. I still think you can beat ULM, even though I think ULM is not a bad G5 team. And the issue with Auburn is last time they played a really good G5 team, they lost to New Mexico State. But currently UL Monroe is 5-1, only loss coming to Texas, who beat them 51-3. And they could still be, they could be 8-1 walking in the Jordan-Hare Stadium. You have to win these next 3 games. These next 3 games are all must wins. And the issue is if Auburn starts winning games, you get confident, because if they're winning games, this talent on this roster can beat A&M, could beat Alabama. That's the issue, is the amount of talent on this team. If they just were able to finish football games and win, the defense is good enough, the offense has firepower, you could beat anybody. That's the biggest issue with this team, is you are good enough to beat everybody on your roster. You're just not. It's stupid. It's dumb. And frankly, it's just annoying. Good news is for everybody out there that's listening to the show, Auburn basketball starts up on October 27th for their charity exhibition match versus Furman. But their season officially starts on November 6th for men's basketball. And for women's basketball, their season officially starts on November 4th against Southern Illinois. Basketball season's right around the corner. We're two weeks away on the dot. Right? Math is mathing. Geek side for Auburn basketball. Two teams that are going to March Madness, and get to enjoy that. But for right now, Auburn football is not enjoyable to watch. Don't know if Auburn's going to a bowl game. Actually, I do know. It's not going to happen. 3-9 season on the way. 5-7 is your ceiling. But overall, I mean, at this point, I don't feel confident Auburn can beat Vanderbilt and Kentucky and find a way to not go 3-9. Or find a way to not go 3-9, if that grammar makes sense. So I'll wrap up the show there. Thanks for watching the topic of the College Loop Podcast. Let me know what your thoughts are of this game. I know it's been back-to-back weeks of ranting, which at some point, something's got to go Auburn's way and something's got to change to where we can start talking about Auburn winning, and that'll be a glorious day. Even if it's an ugly win, a win is a win this season for Auburn. But again, I don't think Auburn should fire Hugh Freeze. If we're 2-5 in 2026 or 2026, for 2-5 by this point in 2025, then yeah, open the checkbook, pay the buyout. But I'm not there yet. I don't think Auburn should be there right now. Don't want to have to continuously be paying for buyouts. Don't want to lose this recruiting class because everybody's been told that we're only a quarterback away. You fire the coach, you lose all that, and you're right back to square one. So, with that being said, thanks for watching this installment of the College Loop Podcast. I'm, of course, still Larck. Able to take on Twitter. Find us on Instagram as well at the College Loop, literally everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those at the College Loop. Also find us on the audio versions find the audio version of the show everywhere as well on Spotify Podcast, Google Podcast, of course, Amazon Music, and of course, check me out on Instagram as well at Dylan Larck, DYLENLARCK. And with all that being said, thanks for watching this installment of the College League Podcast. And as always, War Eagle.